short while back, the IDF has now put out a statement indicating that the Hezbollah chief has been eliminated. Remember, so far there has been no word really coming in from the Hezbollah, while several of the leadership, including their second-in-command, too, appears to have now been eliminated in the strikes that were carried out. Take a look at this detailed report.
Smoke and destruction blanketed Beirut's night sky as Israeli forces unleashed a new wave of airstrikes early today. Massive explosions shook the city, hitting Hezbollah-controlled areas after an Israeli military warning for residents to evacuate. In one of the biggest strikes in the past year, Israel targeted Hezbollah's headquarters, leveling multiple high-rise buildings. The Israeli Air Force confirmed that Mohammad Ali Ismail, the commander of Hezbollah's missile unit in southern Lebanon, was eliminated in a precise strike. His deputy, Hussein Ahmed Ismail, was also eliminated. These strikes follow Israel's intensified campaign against Hezbollah, pushing the conflict to the brink of an all-out war.
צה"ל נמצא במוכנות שיא בכל הגזרות. אנחנו עדיין בודקים את תוצאות התקיפה של המפקדה המרכזית של חיזבאללה, שמוקמה מעל לבניינים אזרחיים בלב שכונת הדחיה, בתוך מרחב תת-קרקעי. אנחנו נעדכן ברגע שנדע. אנחנו יודעים שהתקיפה שלנו הייתה מאוד מדויקת. בשעות הקרובות אנחנו עתידים לתקוף יכולות אסטרטגיות שחיזבאללה הטמין בתשתית תת-קרקעית מתחת ל3 בניינים בלב הדחיה שבביירות.
Hezbollah leader Hasan Nasrallah was reportedly the target of the airstrikes, though his current whereabouts remain unknown. The Israeli military has refused to confirm who was specifically targeted in the raid. The Lebanese Health Ministry has reported at least 6 fatalities, with 91 others injured. Officials fear the death toll could rise as search and rescue teams continue to comb through the rubble of 6 collapsed buildings. This marks the 7th airstrike in Beirut's southern suburbs in the past year, but this is by far the largest. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, addressing the United Nations, reaffirmed that Israel's operations against Hezbollah would continue until its military infrastructure is dismantled.
I said to the people of Lebanon this week, get out of the death trap that Hezbollah has put you in. Don't let Nasrallah drag Lebanon into the abyss. We're not at war with you. We're at war with Hezbollah, which has hijacked your country and threatens to destroy ours. As long as Hezbollah chooses the path of war, Israel has no choice, and Israel has every right to remove this threat and return our citizens to their homes safely. And that's exactly what we're doing. Just this week, the IDF destroyed large percentages of Hezbollah's rockets, which it built with Iran's funding for 3 decades. We took out senior military commanders who not only shed Israeli blood, but American and French blood as well. And then we took out their replacements, and then the replacements of their replacements. And we'll continue degrading Hezbollah until all our objectives are made.
Netanyahu also issued a stern warning to Iran and its proxies.
Because Iran's aggression, if it's not checked, will endanger every single country in the Middle East and many, many countries in the rest of the world. Because Iran seeks to impose its radicalism well beyond the Middle East. That's why it funds terror networks on 5 continents. That's why it builds ballistic missiles for nuclear warheads to threaten the entire world. For too long, the world has appeased Iran. It turns a blind eye to its internal repression. It turns a blind eye to its external aggression. Well, that appeasement must end. And that appeasement must end now.
Shortly after the strikes, Netanyahu cut short his US visit and returned to Israel. With the conflict showing no signs of de-escalation, fears of a larger, more destructive war between Israel and Hezbollah are becoming increasingly real.
Well, Patikrit is joining us on this broadcast. Patikrit, while the IDF makes an assertion that the Hezbollah chief has been eliminated, would this essentially also indicate that perhaps there is an end game to the war?
Thank you, Shawan. Let me put it this way. I think there are certain inflection points when this conflict is going on. First, it is very clear that Israel is going for the jugular of the proxies that has been created by Iran to wage war against Israel, whether it is the Hamas, the Houthis, or the Hezbollah. Second is it is also actually exposing the sectarian divide within Middle East. If you see, there are visuals of Sunni rebels in northern Syria or in the regions of Idlib. They're actually celebrating the death of Hezbollah chief Hasan Nasrallah. Third is a very important issue. The end game which Israel is planning for is primarily because these terror organizations, whether it's Hezbollah or whether it's the Houthis, are not run-of-the-mill conventional terror organizations fighting a war with an AK-47 only. They have been armed to the hilt with cruise missiles, a short-range ballistic missile. They have a large area of loitering munitions, and they have been continuing this sustained low-intensity conflict against Israel for a long time, and it served the purpose of Iran. The important issue right now, as you said, whether it is moving towards the end game, is what Iran does. Because if Iran does not intervene at all, then will it actually mean a loss of face for the Iranian regime? Because these proxies have been funded, trained, incubated, and pushed by Iran itself. Now, when the proxies are actually at a very devastating situation, completely decimated their entire leadership, the middle-level cadre, I think there would be an expectation, whether it's from the Houthis and especially the Hezbollahs, that Iran directly comes and actually helps. If you look at it, in case of Hezbollah, it is not just Hasan Nasrallah. The entire top and the middle rung of the leadership has been decimated primarily by the pager attack, pager explosions, and then what has been the sustained bombing in the last few days. So the pager attack itself actually wounded more than 1,500 and killed more than 500 top operatives and commanders of Hezbollah. It's interesting to see what Iran does, because if Iran comes into the conflict, then it completely takes a different dimension. Israel has made it very clear that if Iran attacks, then we would attack Iran equally. But it's important to understand, given the dimensions of conflicts that today exist, it is highly unlikely that Russia will stay neutral if Iran gets into the war. Already Russians have deployed a large array of surveillance systems, missiles, and everything else, air defense systems in Iran, which came very recently, shipped into Iran when the threat of the war went up. So whether it would be an end game or whether it would be a beginning of a new wave of conflict, where the conflict of Europe between Russia and Ukraine and the Middle Eastern conflict will get converged into a larger conflict with Russia supporting Iran and Israel being supported by the likes of United States and NATO, would be interesting to see. So I don't know what's going to happen, but whatever it is, on one hand, yes, there is a section which is extremely happy because Hezbollah, everything said and done, was a terror organization, and I think Israel has all the rights to attack it. But whether it would lead to end or the beginning of a new dimension of war, that is a worrisome issue, because it could have impacts on the supply chains, prices of essential commodities, right, the sea routes and its safety, all these together. Back to you.
Patrick, I'll just request you to stay on with us as I'm getting more details from the ground. In fact, a short while back, Israeli defense minister, in fact, has now called in a meeting with the chief of Mossad as well as the IDF. Just to quickly take you through the precision attacks that have been carried out by the IDF. One, of course, targeting the headquarters of Hezbollah in Beirut, with the possible target, of course, was the Hezbollah chief, the military commander being the other. In fact, as we speak right now, the meeting which is basically underway at the military headquarters, defense ministers met the Mossad director as well as the IDF chief, is what we're being told. A few members of the IDF also present at the meeting. Now, Patrick, just a quick response from you with regards to the impact that it has in the region right now. Lebanon, once again, indicating that there Perhaps the collateral damage happens to be Lebanon, and the fact that Israel ought to take that into consideration.
Shravan, absolutely, you're right. But I think Netanyahu has been categorically stating to Lebanon that this is not a war against Lebanon. This is a war against Hezbollah. And if you look at central Lebanon or the northern Lebanon, in central Lebanon, most of the Christian communities live, and in the northern Lebanon, the Sunnis live. Both have been extremely happy with what has been happening in southern Lebanon. They're not very unhappy that the attacks have been happening. But if the war takes a larger scale in terms of an Iran versus Israel, then invariably there is no doubt. You're absolutely right. There's a strong possibility that Lebanon will be completely sandwiched in between. The other important issue is it would be interesting to see what the Arab Sunni League, how it reacts. I don't think the likes of Saudi Arab, at least secretly, will be very unhappy with what has happened, because whether it is the Hezbollahs or the Houthis, they waged a war against the Sunni Arab, entire league led by Saudi Arab on one side for almost 1 decade. So if the Iranians get involved, then many countries in between will actually suffer quite a bit. No one can rule out the possibility of Lebanon actually becoming a theater for conflict. Whether it happens or not, well, we actually don't know right now. It may not, but I don't think everybody within Lebanon right now is very unhappy, because Hezbollah and Hasan Nasrallah was not very popular given the kind of tactics they used both on Israel as well as on the Christian and the Sunni population of Lebanon. So you have seen visuals of how they're actually distributing sweets and celebrating. Whether this celebration is short-lived or it will continue, because let me also make it very clear, the Sunnis who are celebrating the death of Nasrallah actually equally have disdain for Israel. So if the conflict expands, continues, sustains, then it will be a different ballgame. Then Lebanon, as you rightly mentioned, will suffer the brunt, bear the brunt. Back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Pathikrit, for putting this into perspective. Once again, with the meeting which is basically underway, one will have to essentially look at whether at all Israel is largely looking at a limited conflict at this point in time, hoping to be able to bring the situation under control.